there, Ramblers, and welcome back to Reese Rambles, my weekly podcast all about the latest comings and goings, movings and shakings, and indeed all the rest of it in the worlds of vintage and retro computing, gaming, and technology. Hope you're all doing well out there. And just off the bat, I just want to explain a bit of an experiment that I am doing with this week's Ramble. You see, a couple of weeks ago, YouTube added this feature that allows us to collaborate with other channels. So in the back end, when we upload a video, we can select another channel to collaborate with, and then if they accept that from their end, it will actually appear on both channels' feeds. And of course, it's designed so we can work together, various different YouTube channels kind of in the same subject area, work together on collaborations and have that actually promoted to both sets of audiences, which is a really cool feature. Something that has been available on other social platforms for quite a while now, and it's really cool to see it officially coming to YouTube. And I got thinking, why not try a bit of an experiment to use this feature to promote my podcast to my main channel viewers? I can set it up as a collaboration with my main channel, and then hopefully, if they are subscribed, it will appear on their subscriptions feed, and perhaps on people's homepages and stuff as well. So I'm not saying I'm going to make a regular thing of this. Perhaps there are people out there who are deliberately avoiding my second channel and my podcast, but I highly suspect that there are quite a lot of people who aren't even aware that this exists, and I thought, well, why not take this opportunity to promote it to them? Might not work, who knows? And I'm not saying I'm unhappy with the around 2,000 people a week who do tune in to this podcast. Of course, it is very much appreciated, but it's always good to use the tools that we have available to us to try to get the word out, of course. So, the other big piece of news for this week, personally, just before we dive into the stories for this week, is that I am now moved into my new studio. Last weekend, I finished moving the last of the stuff out of my old studio. If you are a supporter of mine on Patreon or Ko-fi, or indeed if you're a YouTube channel member over on my main channel, you no doubt will have seen a video where I showed off this new space and what it looked like before I moved in. Very much urban exploration vibes. These offices have been abandoned since about 2019, I think. And there's a whole story behind that, which I do explain in the video. And I will do a new studio tour as well, hopefully next week on the main channel, showing the new space and what it's all about and the before and after. And the sheer amount of work that I've had to put in over the past couple of weeks to turn this into a nice space that I can actually record in. So just briefly, there are a few different offices here that are all kind of interconnected and part of the block that I am renting. This one is now pretty much ready. I've done the carpet tiles, I've repainted. Obviously, I've moved all my shelving and stuff in, had to get all the lighting and everything set up. Very happy with that. It is all looking rather nice. And I have started on the office next door, which is going to be a storeroom. And I'm kind of setting that up as like a museum exhibit type setup with stuff on the shelves and things. Because I do occasionally have visitors, and it would be nice to have more of them, particularly as I do now have this much bigger space available to me. So that is that. And as part of all of that, I have also released my first video on the main channel in 2 months. I said last week that I was aiming to get that done and out for today, for Friday the 7th of November. And I'm very pleased to report that is very much now a thing that's out there. It's a review of this, the Atari 2600 Plus PAC-MAN Edition. It's a new, very bright, very yellow version of the Atari 2600 Plus. Of course, their reimagined 2600, which was released back in 2023. And obviously I was quite impressed with it. I'm a big fan of the 2600 Plus and the 7800 Plus. And this is kind of more of the same, but very yellow, and with some new wireless joysticks and things as well, which I think are very cool. So yeah, you can go and watch that. That will be linked down below in the description and in the show notes if you are listening to this on your podcast platform of choice. Of course, a big bit of news for this week, and we'll make it the first item. Why not? The 2600 Plus PAC-MAN Edition has been released. It's $169, or you can go and you can buy it on the Atari website. They have various bundles and things available. For that, £129.99 here in the UK for the console itself, which comes with the wireless yellow joystick and the Pac-Man double feature, which is a new version of Pac-Man, much closer to the arcade original than the 2600 version that we got back in the day. I do also review that as part of the video if you want to go and check that out. And so you can buy that from the Atari website. Lots of very cool bundles on there. And also on Amazon, there is the Play On store on Amazon, which has this console available, £129.95. And they also have the original 2600 Plus, the 7800 Plus, and all of the various games and accessories and things. And as part of this 45th anniversary Pac-Man celebration, and also as a bit of a celebration of the collaboration between Atari and Bandai Namco, which is very much a very long-running thing. Atari, of course, had the rights to distribute Namco's arcade games in, outside of Japan back in the 80s. As part of that, they are also re-releasing some classic Bandai Namco games as in physical form, so you can play them on your original consoles or indeed on your new Atari Plus consoles, or as part of the Atari 50th anniversary celebration thing as a DLC pack. That is news. It sounds like a promotional thing. It sounds like an advertising thing. I promise I'm not being paid to tell you all of this, other than the fact that they sent me this console for review, but I thought it was only fair that I talk about that because, of course, I know a lot of you tune in for Atari news. So with that long-winded intro and somewhat of a first story / self-promo out of the way, I guess we'd better get on with the rest of the stories for this week's Ramble. So, as you might expect, as a direct result of all of those Atari shenanigans, I am in a somewhat nostalgic mood this week. It's been quite a while since I've had a chance to sit down and pick up and play some of those old Atari games, and I have sat up on the shelf, now over in my museum section. And it was, it had me looking back kind of quite wistfully at the gaming past, even more so than I usually do every week when I sit down to record these rambles. So this project very much kind of struck a chord with me. This was posted over on my Discord server by Steve's Tech Shed. I know I usually save the credits and things till the end, but in this case, you can have an extra special shout out because, I am a big fan of this. I think this is a very cool thing, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention as well. So this is all about shaders, GPU shaders, and of course, I think in their most primitive form, we have scan lines, of course. So when you are playing these old games on your emulator of choice, or indeed on your MiSTer system, you can switch on the scan lines, and you can have those horizontal black lines across the screen that try to at least approximate, or at least kind of be somewhat reminiscent of how the game would have looked on a CRT back in the day, of course, CRT TV. And this is an area that I think there have been some really, really big and quite impressive strides in over the past couple of years. So we have all of these kind of low-level pixel, even sub-pixel level phosphor effects and things going on now with these shaders, of course, handled by the GPU in your machine. And some really impressive looking stuff, I will say. But the limitation of these is that they do tend to be kind of confined to your emulator, or indeed your MiSTer, if you're using them on MiSTer. So how cool would it be if you could apply these shader effects to, well, anything at all you have running on your PC? Well, that is the idea behind this project, which is called Shader Glass. And the more I look at this, the more I like it. So this is an overlay for running GPU shaders on top of Windows Desktop. It's an open source project. It's released under the GPL3 license, and it's available over on github.com. So yeah, my hat is off to the author of this project, Mousimus. It's such an inspired thing. So before we have a look at some screenshots and things, we'll just go over the blurb, I guess, the bullet points on here. It applies shader effects on top of the desktop in a floating window or full screen. It has built-in RetroArch shader library, which is at 1200 plus shaders, which include things like CRT monitor simulation, which I just talked about, but also stuff like image upscaling, TV, VHS, and handheld simulation, and some actually genuinely quite useful effects as well, like softening, denoising, blur, sharpen, and many, many more. And this, because of the way that this has been implemented, it works with pretty much every emulator you can think of, every retro platform or pixel art editor, so DOSBox, FSUAE, Altera, ScumVM, AGS, Vice, and Aseprite are the ones that are mentioned here on GitHub, but of course it is not limited to those. Excellent companion for pixel art, so yeah, if you are a pixel artist and you want to see what your finished work will look like on various displays and things, or various emulators, this is a great way to preview that very quickly and very easily. You can use it on top of YouTube, Twitch, or modern games if you want to, if you want to see how they would look on a CRT. Also allows capture from a USB source, so a webcam or a capture card from your retro consoles or whatever. Profile, savable, loadable profiles. We've got external support for external shaders. It's highly customizable, and it can even be captured by OBS as well, which is what I actually use for recording these rambles, and indeed all of the screen capture stuff that I do. So, and of course, OBS also used for streaming on Twitch and YouTube. I will say quite an important consideration there. If you want to live stream stuff with this, with one of these kind of effects applied, very easy way to do it, thanks to Shader Glass, and it's all free and open source. Obviously, you can see now why I wanted you to know about this. So, the latest version is available as of the 29th of August. There is a link on here to donate if you like the project and you want to buy the author a coffee. But yeah, it's free. Otherwise, you can get it on Steam. So, the system requirements, Windows 10 version 2004 or indeed Windows 11, and a DirectX 11 capable GPU. So, there is a demo on YouTube, which you can click here and you can go and take a look at. I was hoping that would open in a new window, but it hasn't. But anyway, this is what it looks like. Look at this. So this is one of the modes, which is where you have this free-floating window that you can just drag around over the top of other stuff. This has a CRT shader effect applied to it. So it has this... creates this kind of convex-looking, obviously the shape of an original CRT TV, and also has the scan lines and a bit of a kind of a flickery type effect as well. Works seamlessly, instantly, in real time on top of whatever you drag it over. And you can see how easily you can switch between the various different modes and things. We've got the full screen mode being demoed here as well. And works with static images and videos. How cool is this, bro? Look at this Doom. It's such a brilliant effect. I will link this video down below, of course, along with... Look at that, there's a Game Boy shader as well, if you want to see what Doom looks like running on a Game Boy. I will, of course, link this demo video down below, along with the GitHub page and, of course, the Steam page as well for this. Yeah, not limited to video effects. You can have various surrounds and overlays and things applied via this as well. But we will just pop back to the GitHub page, and they do have some screenshots. We've got the desktop glass mode, which is what we just saw demoed as part of that demo in the video. Window clone mode, so you can actually fix it to a specific window, and it will clone that window and apply the effects to that window, so you can use that with your favorite emulator. We just have some examples here of FSUAE, the Amiga emulator running Monkey Island here. Altera, which is, of course, is the Atari XL emulator. We've got Ninja from 1986 there running with an effect. So your emulator doesn't need to support these effects. DOSBox and many others. And this was, it was built using Visual Studio 2022 and the Windows SDK in C++, and it uses the Windows Capture API in DirectX 11. So unfortunately, it is Windows only. It is very much tied to those kind of underlying Windows-specific technologies. Fair enough, if we know that going in. I imagine this would be a very, very difficult thing to pull off, and to make it cross-platform as well, to have it kind of, capture the desktop output and apply this stuff in real time. It's quite the feat. It's provided under the GPL version 3, includes the precompiled shaders from the libretro RetroArch shader repository. As mentioned, there's 1,200 of those. There are, of course, some of those are covered by their own copyrights and stuff, which the GitHub page does bring your attention to. And I don't know what else I can say on this. I love this project. I think this is a fantastic looking thing. Very easy to download as well. You can go and grab it on Steam if you like and install it that way. It is free over there, and of course that will keep it up to date and stuff as well. Yeah, wonderful, wonderful stuff. Very lightweight requirements as well. That DirectX 11 GPU, 1 gig of RAM, and Windows 10 or Windows 11. And my hat is off to you, the author of this project, Mousimus. Shader Glass. Please do go and check it out if you are into your retro gaming and stuff. It's a very cool thing indeed. And a big thank you once again to Steve for bringing this to my attention. I love it. Those of you who are regular ramblers here will no doubt be well aware that I am a huge supporter of game preservation, particularly giving people access to all of the games that I think are a really important part of our cultural heritage and our history. And back in the day of the Atari, for example, of course, everything was released on cartridge, and those cartridges still exist. The hardware to play them still exists, and you can pick them up and you can still play them as if it was the 80s or the 90s or whatever. But as things have become increasingly online, that is sadly no longer the case. Lots of games being released just lately with online components to them, online activation, DRM, multiplayer only online games. And when the publishers of those games shut down the servers, they are no longer playable. And an important piece of history is lost. And we are seeing this happening more and more just lately. And as a result of that, there has been the rise of this global online movement called Stop Killing Games. So they have an official website on stopkillinggames.com. And the figurehead kind of behind all of this is a chap called Ross, who has a YouTube channel called Accursed Farms, which I will link down below. And you can go and check out all of his updates on this, or indeed, you can go back and listen to some previous episodes of Reese Rambles where I have covered this in depth and how it has kind of unfolded over the past couple of years. And kind of the big turning point for this was an Ubisoft game called The Crew, which was switched off last year after a very, very short run of availability. And it was still available to purchase at full price in the shops. And when they switched off the servers, the game just stopped working completely. And people who'd gone out and bought this game in good faith, hoping to, spend some time playing it, just couldn't play it at all. And it kind of brought to a lot of people's attention that this isn't really fair, that we need expiration dates at the very least on these games, if not a commitment from these publishers and these game developers to kind of support these games for at least some minimum length of time. And that's kind of what Stop Killing Games is all about. Now, here in the UK, there was a petition, a parliamentary petition, which sadly was dissolved when we had our general election last year. There was a new petition which was launched, and basically it has collected the requisite number of signatures, which means that it has, there is a requirement for it to be debated by our government in Parliament. And there has been some news on that this week, which I wanted to talk about because this has made national news and it's actually looking quite positive. So always good to report on some positive news in this space. So this is a story without further waffling over on The Independent, which is quite a big national news outlet here in the UK, quite a big newspaper and quite cool to see. And the headline here: developers warned they may be breaking the law by making video games unplayable. And this is actually a rather nice summary of this and the debate that has been happening among some of our MPs, so very cool to see. Concerns were raised after developer Ubisoft discontinued online racing game The Crew in 2024, which of course I just mentioned. A story here by Harry Taylor, theindependent.com. Video game developers, writes Harry, could be in breach of consumer protection law by effectively switching off titles, rendering them unplayable for customers who have bought them, an MP has stated. Mark Sewards, the Labour MP for Leeds South West and Morley, highlighted concerns that this practice is unfair, given that purchasers are not explicitly informed of this possibility at the point of sale. Mr. Sewards, who is a member of a parliamentary group focused on consumer protection, also voiced fears that such a precedent could eventually extend to physical goods, as digital technology becomes increasingly integrated into household items. And I think this is a very, very important point here. Of course, we focus on games here, but there is a much wider point which is talked about a bit later on in this story. So, Mr. Seward said, when you buy something, should you have the right to keep it? Let me be clear about the ask here. I'm not demanding that publishers keep servers running forever. Campaigners are not asking for indefinite technical support. We are not asking these companies to keep pouring resources into a game that they themselves are finished with. What we are asking is fairly simple. A publisher should not be able to deliberately disable every copy of a game that consumers have already purchased, leaving them with nothing. He added the publisher should have a duty to ensure that the game, purchased and owned by the consumer, remains playable in some way. The government has said it has no plans to amend consumer law, and while I respect the government's position, I can't help but observe that what's happening in this space could be perceived as a breach of consumer protection from unfair trading regulations. Those regulations prohibit traders from hiding information that consumers need to make an informed choice, and yet, when you buy a game today, you are almost never told how long it will remain functional. You are sold a one-time purchase, but the publisher reserves the right to terminate it at any time for any reason. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. His Labour colleague, Warinder Juss from Wolverhampton West, said new regulations were needed. We do not accept our mobile phones being switched off whenever a company produces a new model and wants us to buy a new model, Mr. Juss said. So why should we allow thousands of pounds worth of games being made unplayable because new games have been introduced? Mr. Seward added, do we really want to wait until our phones, our fridges, our cars are affected by this before we act in this small way on what is a relatively small area? The Westminster Hall debate was sparked by an online petition signed by nearly 190,000 people that urged the government to stop video game publishers from disabling video games. A similar European petition has more than 1.4 million backers. And the story goes on to basically, of course, explain what Stop Killing Games is all about and the history behind the campaign. Really good story, this, a really good kind of summary of this, and great to see MPs getting on board with this and being very well informed as well about the finer points of what this movement is all about, which does actually give me some hope. All that we ask is that publishers put that information out there and let people know that these games are going to be switched off at some point, and perhaps give people some kind of indication as to what that might be. I don't think that's too big of an ask, is it? But anyway, the debate, I'm going to carry on reading this, but please do go and check out the website because there's quite a bit more to this as well, including a video. The debate saw video games compared to the works of Shakespeare. As Ben Goldsborough, South Norfolk, said, culturally, the blocking of games was akin to pulping every copy of William Shakespeare's plays. Of course, I am now just 5 minutes down the road from Stratford-upon-Avon, so very much, struck a chord with me. Opening the debate, the Labour MP said, gamers deserve clarity. If a game is likely to go offline, they should be told. Where possible, offline modes should be provided. When closures are unavoidable, there should be clear notice periods and, where appropriate, refunds. And where a game has no commercial future, studios should be encouraged or supported to preserve assets for cultural history. The debate heard video game developers have claimed it would be expensive to provide ongoing support for diminishing number of players, which I do think is a valid concern. And the Culture Minister, Stephanie Peacock, said the government will consider asking Chartered Trading Standards Institute to develop guidance to ensure manufacturers clearly tell players that games could be deactivated when they are purchased. Ms. Peacock said that the passion behind the campaign demonstrates that the core underlying principle is a valid one, that gamers should have confidence in the right to access the games that they have paid to play. At the same time, the government also recognises the concerns from the video gaming industry regarding some of the campaign's asks. UK law is very clear. It requires information to consumers to be clear and correct, and the government is clear. The law works, but companies may need to communicate better. So the main takeaways from this: yes, it has been debated. Lots of, a few different MPs on board with this, very well informed, like I say. The Culture Minister herself has also chimed in and said that, yes, they will be talking to trading standards to discuss perhaps enabling some clearer consumer laws, some clearer labelling laws on this, which I think is great. I think this all sounds very positive indeed, I will say. Really nice to see this kind of positive outcome from this campaign. Of course, this isn't the end. They haven't enforced any laws. They haven't announced that they are going to be enforcing any laws. And I know it's a very small thing, and the government have much bigger, much more important things to worry about. But this is something I've been following for quite a long time, and it would be nice. It would be quite cool to see the UK kind of being one of the countries to lead the charge on this and kind of set the example. Of course, we are, I think the EU, America, this has already been, I will say, this has already kind of been, discussed and debated in the US. And I think we've pretty much given up on anything happening over there as far as consumer protection is concerned. And I think as far as the Stop Killing Games movement were concerned, I think the EU was basically where we were kind of focusing our attention. So, but yeah. Nice to see my country, the UK, at least appearing to care and perhaps want to be making moves towards doing the right thing in the near future. As always, watch this space, and as any more news comes up on this, I will keep you updated. Some 8-bit news next, which is always very welcome indeed, of course, and I'm sure many of you out there, myself included, remember playing David Braben and Ian Bell's classic space trading and combat simulation game Elite, which was released way back in 1984, of course, predominantly known as a BBC micro game, but also released on quite a few different 8-bit platforms of the time as well. Very influential and quite a revolutionary game as well when it was first released. Of course, it used procedural generation to create that enormous universe that the game inhabited. And hours of fun. Very kind of deep gameplay, particularly for its time. And of course, a series that has continued. There have been various entries in the series over the years, and indeed Elite Dangerous a few years ago. But one platform that Elite never officially made it to was the Atari 8-bit platform, which of course is of particular interest to me. The Atari 8-bits, starting with the 400 and the 800 computers released back in 1979. And going on, of course, we had the XE, the XL, the XE game system. Very long-running platform indeed, and a very capable one. One that I think a lot of people outside of the Atari community perhaps don't appreciate the capabilities of, particularly considering it was a very early one, like I say, 1979, compared to stuff like the Commodore 64 and things like that. So there is now a porting effort underway to get Elite running on the Atari 8-bit computers, and an official demo has been released, which I think is definitely well worth going and checking out. So, I refer your attention to the Atari Age forums. There's also a video of this, which we will take a look at in a second. This is, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that name, or maybe I shall. Reif Snyderb. Reef Snyderb. I don't know. Anyway, coming soon to an Atari 8-bit computer near you. Elite, the disc version. System requirements, an Atari 400 or 800 with at least 48K of memory and OSB, or an Atari XL or XE with at least 48K of memory and an XL or XE OS. Of course, a joystick, a floppy drive, or a device that can read from and write to ATR images, disk images, so a flash cartridge or the FujiNet or something like that. Features 31 possible ships, enhanced AI and spawning, flashing cockpit indicators, 3 ship colours in a 3D scanner. We've got coloured crosshairs, 9 colours on the cockpit display, a proper docking computer, ship hangar displayed after docking, flicker-free ships and space stations, both space station types. Planets have craters, meridians and or equators. Optimizations have been made that include the use of logarithm-based math routines, and many more. I do appreciate a good logarithm. Today, I am releasing the demo version of my port of Elite to the Atari 8-bit computer. This demo version was created from, and with great thanks to, Mark Moxon's reverse engineering of the BBC Micro source code for the disk version of Elite. This demo release does not permit loading or saving of games. However, I do have a version in development that does permit loading and saving of games. In the near future, I will be releasing that version as well. So it sounds like this is pretty fully featured already. No loading and saving support, but there is a version coming that does support that. So very cool, very cool. Supports keyboard controls as well. And this has been released as an ATR disk image that you can just go and download from Atari Age. So, there is a backstory to this, and I am going to read this. So, many of us have been teased with a recent non-optimized port of the tape version of Elite and another porting project with no end in sight. As a result, I got frustrated and decided to make it happen myself. This is how all the best projects come about, isn't it? Originally, I explored porting the tape version to the CC65. After over an hour of work and study of the source code, I realised that was a really dumb idea. It was then that I spent a little while reviewing the differences between the original tape version and disc versions of Elite, and then decided if I was going to port Elite to the Atari 8-bit computer, I should do the disc version, as it has a lot more features. After an additional 15 minutes of work, I was able to compile the disc version of Elite to run on the BBC Micro. Countless changes needed to be made to the source code to adapt it to run on the Atari computer. Of course, the chain of loading software needed to be reworked for the Atari environment. Display lists need to be created, VBlank interrupts and display list interrupts needed to be written. All of the page 0 variables needed to be moved around. Countless other variables and structures needed to be relocated. All of the pixel drawing routines needed to be modified for Atari's linear screen memory layout. Variables and structures needed to be relocated in memory. Some systems, such as the galactic chart, were set aside until I could come up with a better idea of how to handle them later on. Other changes were made when I found better ways to handle them. I originally had the computer do all of the pixel plotting math, then later changed some of the math out for a couple lookup tables to reduce the CPU's time spent on calculating pixel locations. I hope all of this is going in. My goodness, this is a monumental effort. I like this, particularly for one person as well. It took several attempts to get the flicker-free graphics working, and ultimately I consulted with the BBC master source code in order to work out the final problems. Even the ship blueprints needed to be changed as they are loaded at a different memory location than where they were originally located on the BBC Micro. The game is playable now, and I've even been able to make trade runs, dogfight, get blown up, etc. There still should be a few changes and a few bugs to track down, and the system to delete a save game still needs to be modified and re-included for the Atari. Should be a bug or two encountered when displaying your inventory if the types of items in your cargo bay is too numerous to display on screen. I haven't even looked at the 2 special mission screens yet and anticipate they need to be adapted to the Atari environment. The planets should probably be adapted to be flicker-free as well. Anyway, yeah, joystick may need a fine and coarse movement setting and probably some other minor adjustments to make. And there's a load more information here over on this Atari Age post, and indeed some screenshots of this as well, running in Altera. The second shout out for the Atari 8-bit emulator in this episode of Reese Rambles. But I think without further ado, as they like to say on YouTube, we'll go and check out the official YouTube video of this. This is over on the Atari Tekka channel. Let's subscribe to that. There you go. Definitely want to keep up with, ring the bell as well. I definitely want to keep up with updates on this because it looks like a really cool... I mean, look at this. Look at how good this looks already. Anyone who remembers playing Elite, I mean, this speaks for itself, doesn't it? So, is this just the title screen? Does this show some actual... It does show some gameplay as well. Let's just skip ahead in this video. We have, obviously, approaching a planet here, docking. We've got... leaving a planet here. We've got flying around in space. And we have, views of planet and stuff in here as well. I'm not quite sure why I'm trying to describe all of this video to you. You can go and check it out for yourself. And that's a procedural generation, of course, in full view here. I once had, I once talked about procedural generation and Elite, and had someone get quite angry at me and argue with me, saying just because it was used for like a very small aspect of the universe itself doesn't make the game procedurally generated, because all of the UI and stuff was kind of static. Which was a very odd argument. If you're still out there and you're still listening, get a life. Anyway, that is the port of Elite, the disc version, to the Atari 8-bit computers. So cool to see such a full-featured demo released. And, my hat is off. I mean, if I ever wore a hat, I know I say that a lot, but my hat is off to you, developer of this game. And... it blows me away every week to see these homebrew projects and these efforts by these developers, particularly these one-person teams, not to take away from the slightly bigger teams that do work on some of these other projects. But Elite was such a huge game back in the day and never got an official Atari 8-bit release. And, for one person to kind of get so frustrated with the lack of a decent version on the Atari and, take matters into their own hands and, put this out there for free as well, it just goes to show what the community is like around these old machines and why we keep doing this. So, wonderful, wonderful stuff. Of course, accelerating and upgrading computers and making them far more capable than their manufacturers ever originally intended has been a thing since these machines were new. Adding all sorts of insanely fast CPUs, accelerator boards, it's always been quite big business. And the homebrew hardware acceleration scene in recent years has been really active and really great to see. People, really kind of pushing the capabilities of these old computers and what they can do. Particularly in the Amiga and like Atari ST world, they are ones that I'm kind of quite close to and get to see on a regular basis. And it's not something I've really given a lot of coverage to personally, I will say, purely because I'm more on kind of the nostalgia side and getting the most out of these machines kind of as they were. But certainly no disrespect at all to the people coming up with these incredibly clever hardware upgrades and things and pushing the limits. So I was very, very interested indeed to see a rather cool project pop up over on my Discord, in fact, this week. And this is apparently the first time a classic Macintosh has been successfully booted with a 68060 CPU in it. So, of course, the classic Macs had the Motorola 68000 CPU, very, very popular CPU back in the day, used in the ST and the Amiga as well, of course, as well as the Mega Drive and a load of other stuff at kind of mid 80s to kind of mid 90s. A very, a pretty ubiquitous CPU, I will say. And of course, in the intervening years, Motorola did release various upgraded and improved versions of that. The 68010, the 20, the 30. Of course, the 68030 was famously used in the Falcon 030. Partly, giving its name to that. And I believe the Amiga, one of the high-end Amigas, the 1200, stuff like that, were they 68030 as well? Apologies, specifics of Amiga hardware, not really my area of expertise. But anyway, much, much more capable than that original 68000 CPU, but lots of changes and things, of course, internally, and all sorts of things that mess with the timing of that classic software and stuff. So getting a super powerful version of one of these CPUs and slapping it into one of these lower powered machines is not a trivial upgrade whatsoever. And so that's what makes this project over on GitHub particularly noteworthy, this project from Zigzag Joe. And this is the Macintosh Q650 68060 project. A 68060 in a Macintosh Quadra 650. This project is a collection of ROM modifications to get a minimum level of functionality out of a Macintosh Quadra 650/800 or a Centris 650 with a 68060 installed on an appropriate adapter. As currently sits, it can boot an unmodified System 7.1 install. Much will not work and remains to be done. I do not expect to finish it. I do like the transparency here, managing expectations, very much so. So there is proof here. This is an experimental proof of concept only, and no warranty is expressed or implied. Please don't rush out to replicate this unless you know what you're doing. So let's go over to YouTube. This has been released as a short, as a vertical video. We'll start at the beginning. And we have a shot here of this homemade adapter board here in this Quadra 650 motherboard. We've got a cat stomping all over the motherboard. Wonderful stuff. What a beautiful cat. I will say, big fluffy boy. And we can see we have a small screen hooked up to this machine here. We've got lots of other extra bits and bobs hooked up to this motherboard, oscilloscope probes and all sorts. But most importantly, we can see System 7.1, the classic Macintosh operating system, booting very, very quickly indeed on this CPU that certainly was never intended to be fitted to this machine. It's a very short video. It's only 34 seconds long, just showing that boot process. And of course, this kind of homemade 68060 adapter board is kind of part of this project. Not quite sure what some of these other bits and pieces are. We've got some kind of SCSI hard drive emulator thing plugged in as well, and some other things. But very early days for Zigzag Joe's project here. But I love it. Taking these old machines, pushing the limits of what they are capable of, and slapping totally inappropriate CPUs into them is very much up my street, I will say. So, cool project. Just wanted to make you aware of that. And of course, will be linked in the usual places down in the description and also in the show notes if you are listening on your podcast platform of choice. It's time. Time for my Doom story of the week. All right, this isn't an official thing, although perhaps I should make it an official thing, considering I do seem to have a Doom story every single week. But as you may know, Doom is one of my favourite games of all time, if not my favourite game, and that's why I have the Doom Shrine behind me. Another shout out for the Doom Shrine, my collection of Doom-related paraphernalia. I should probably put a bit of a video together explaining what this is all about at some point, but Doom games, the original release, the original mail-order release, the original shareware version that we had on our PC back in the day, and all the collectibles and things that I have behind me. It's fair to say that I am a big fan of id Software's seminal 1993 first-person shooter, a game that I think changed the world. Anyway, every week we seem to have a different story about someone running Doom on some kind of weird or wonderful device. And this week is no exception. So let's head over to tomshardware.com and see what someone has managed to run Doom on this week. Yep, it's a satellite. It's going to take a lot to top that, isn't it? A programmer installed and ran Doom on an orbiting European Space Agency satellite, writes Bruno Ferreira on the 1st of November on tomshardware.com. There were lots of interesting topics discussed in the recent Ubuntu Summit, writes Mr. Ferreira. But one in particular might just tickle the fancy of most any techie above 30. The story of how Doom was actually running in space. Programmer Olafur Wage, apologies if that's wrong, it probably is wrong, bit of a recurring theme here, recounted the tale of when his team took part in the European Space Agency's hacking challenge and got the seminal game running on a satellite. There's that word again, seminal. Of course, it has another meaning as well, which we probably shouldn't go into. Anyway, the satellite in question was the now decommissioned OPS-SAT flying laboratory, whose sole purpose in life was to be a playground of sorts for improving mission control and onboard satellite systems. It measured only 10 by 10 by 30 centimetres, so one of these CubeSats, I guess, which is 3.94 inches by 3.94 inches by 11.81 inches, in case you were wondering, and carried an onboard computer the ESA said was 10 times more powerful than any ESA spacecraft at the time. The ESA, of course, being the European Space Agency. Researchers were given relatively free rein of the machine in a bid for hackers to do whatever they wished to collectively test the capabilities and find/break the limits of the improved onboard computer and its associated equipment. The project achieved a few firsts. The first onboard machine learning training of a model, the first in-orbit game of chess, and the first stock transaction executed from space. That's cool. And apparently, the first to run Doom in orbit. There is a YouTube video here, Doom on a satellite. I guess we won't give that a watch. We'll carry on reading the story here. But if you want to check that out, of course, the story will be linked, so you can go and give that a little looky. Despite the relatively powerful computer compared to the 1992 era Intel 486 machines that originally ran Doom, the software environment was still limited. The team couldn't just upload every software dependency needed to build the game. Additionally, each hacking team had limited time slots to push and run code on the satellite, making attempts very precious and precluding any real-time input. This also meant that the team had to use the Doom time demos of the first level. So yeah, no real-time control of the game, but still running Doom. I think we'll still give them that. It took 2 tries, with the first using Chocolate Doom, a source-faithful port that uses SDL as its graphics and sound backend, an OS-agnostic library with very few dependencies. It worked well enough, but it produced no graphical output, as the satellite didn't have a screen. And as Wage put it, even if it did, you'd need a really good telescope. You certainly would. At this point, all the team had was the final level text output with the percentage complete and enemies killed. It was nevertheless a good check that the code was running smoothly and unaffected by cosmic rays. Since Wage and his imps wanted some graphical output, they pivoted to Doom Generic, a port of Doom designed to make porting to other systems easier. They then assigned graphical output to a virtual video card and took screenshots of the game. But then, how do you proudly display to the world that this particular Doom was in space? By using the satellite's camera images of Earth for the game's outdoor background, of course. This clever idea came with a few problems of its own, as the really nice camera on board the satellite produced images with far more resolution and bit depth than the game engine would take. So the team had to turn to an onboard AI model from another team that would resize and color reduce the photographs to 8-bit files with relatively little color loss. Even so, that wasn't enough, as Doom's 256 colour palette is fixed and lacks many of the hues needed for the mostly blue, brown and green images. Complex problems beget complex solutions though, so the ultimate heresy was performed, slightly tweaking the game's colour palette to better match the fancy background. It was as if suddenly a million geeks cried out in terror. We can only look forward to Doom actually running on Mars, where the game is set. And I'm going to have to check out this YouTube video now, aren't I? Because we want to see this thing running with this real-time camera input. And here he is. Look, it's his YouTube channel. So we have a bit of... I need to sit down and watch. I'm going to add this to my watch later list. Hang on. Just bear with me a second. Save to watch later. Thank you very much. And can we see some footage here? This looks like a really good video, actually. It looks like it's quite in-depth as to how all this game was put together. And I just want to check out these actual live Earth images in the Doom engine. So there we go. We've got the original image and presumably the converted version. And there's the money shot there. We've got him running around outside. Where's the screenshot? There was the money shot. I do apologise to my audio listeners, by the way. This is me seeking back and forth through a YouTube video that I haven't actually seen before. There we go, there's the shot of the actual live Earth image and presumably a bit of an explanation as to how they tweak the palette to make that work within Doom. But yeah, I'm going to watch this video. I suggest you go watch it too. 8 minutes and 18 seconds, but the real story here, of course, on tomshardware.com is that Doom has now been ported to a satellite, a new entry in the ever-growing list of weird and wonderful devices to run Doom. And as stated previously, that is going to take some topping, isn't it? Great to see. Commodore is back. I think that's something that is pretty well established by this point. Of course, earlier this year, retro tech YouTuber Christian Perifractic Simpson, a British guy based over in LA who makes some rather nice retro-themed videos with his wife and his dog, of course, and their new baby. He decided he wanted to try to acquire the rights to the Commodore brand, so the company that made the Commodore 64 and the Amiga and, of course, lots of other iconic machines over the years. He was successful in that particular endeavour, and they have now launched the C64 Ultimate, a reissued version of their 80s home computer, the Commodore 64, and they're actually selling very, very well, and it looks like a pretty decent piece of hardware. So, happy ending, I guess, to that story. Lots of ex-Commodore staff involved as well in that project, and of course, lots of future projects in the pipeline that have been hinted at. However, there is a bit of a twist to this story, as always. The ownership of the rights to the Commodore name and logo have been contested over the years. Since the 90s, they've been split up, they've been sold off to various different entities, different people claiming to have the legal right to trade using the name and the logo, different groups claiming to be the one and only official Commodore. It's all been a mess, and of course, this latest acquisition hasn't done anything to resolve that situation, unfortunately. And there has been some news on that front this week, so I thought I would report on that. And this is over on TimeExtension.com. Commodore Industries is trying to prevent the revived Commodore International from using the iconic name. Confused? We are too, writes Damien McFerrin. And the story just starts explaining. I must admit, just as a little diversion, when I saw the tiny version of this thumbnail when it was posted online, and obviously saw the Commodore logo and stuff, I thought that was Perifractic actually, because he's got the same kind of square head and beard thing going on. Anyway, the story starts off explaining all of the stuff that I've just explained to you, so I won't go over that again. But when the purchase was in its final stages, writes Damien, Commodore Industries SRL, an Italian revival of the brand founded by Luigi Simonetti back in 2017, challenged the revived trademarks. And this is something I did report on Reese Rambles at the time. And he put out a statement saying, Commodore Industries SRL has always been willing to collaborate with anyone who truly wants to enhance and promote the brand and what it has represented for all of us in the community. However, where necessary, we will be ready to protect our rights before any authority on the strength of the legal and substantive grounds that have been explained in detail in this press release. And we have some images here of some products which are currently being sold by the Italian Commodore. Stuff like USB flash drives, wireless speakers, a tablet. Many assumed or perhaps hoped some kind of deal would be reached between Commodore Industries and Commodore International, but that doesn't seem to be the case, continues Damien. In a post on the Commodore 64 Facebook group, spotted by Commodore blog, Commodore Industries has moved to prevent Commodore International from using the name. And I don't have Facebook, so Unfortunately, Commodore Industries SRL Italy has moved on to step 2. Back in July, they announced their intention to fight for their trademark rights. Meanwhile, they're attempting to have the Commodore wordmark removed from the BV's register. I had really hoped the parties would reach an agreement behind the scenes, but that doesn't seem likely. Let's hope this doesn't negatively impact deliveries in Europe. David Pleasance hinted in an interview that deliveries this year would be very challenging anyway. Our sympathies certainly lie with the new trademark holders, who are now relaunching a product based on Gideon's FPGA board. However, we should also acknowledge that Commodore Italy has been in the business since 2017, offers its own magazine for Italian retro enthusiasts, and also wants to survive. So the news here is that they have, they threatened to file a lawsuit, as I reported back in July, and they have now actually started proceedings to file that lawsuit against Perifractic's Commodore. So under Simonetti's leadership, Commodore Industries has produced a series of products, including laptops, tablets, headphones, cables, and speakers, all emblazoned with the famous Commodore logo. It has not, however, attempted to resurrect any of Commodore's previous systems, but it is involved in video games, producing fresh versions of New Zealand Story and Xenon. And in a A seemingly unrelated post, Commodore International has posted a letter from Leonard Trammell, the son of Jack Trammell, of course, the original founder of Commodore. While it's an impassioned and heartfelt message, the complex situation regarding the ownership of Commodore name means that this could potentially get quite messy, regardless of how Commodore's original owners feel. So there we go. What was that? That was a link to a Nostalgia Nerd video. Is that link wrong? Anyway. So yeah, the long and the short of this is there are two Commodores. And, I don't think anyone is claiming that one has more of a right to their name over the other. Of course, Perry-Fractic has bought this Dutch-owned Commodore brand in good faith and has, a lot of the original Commodore people from the 90s involved, including David Pleasance himself, who was their marketing manager, I believe, at the time. And this Italian company, who isn't in the business of retro stuff, they are producing modern electronics with the Commodore name on, did kind of offer to work with them, but also wants to actively protect their trademark, and they are now suing the other Commodore, so it seems. Nothing new in the Commodore world, I will say, but certainly new territory for Perry-Fractic. It'll be very interesting to see how this one plays out. And that, my dearest Ramblers, brings us around rather neatly to my regular Videos of the Week feature, wherein I feature some videos that I have seen here on the old YouTubes that are retro or vintage related, or perhaps not in some cases, videos that have inspired or educated or entertained or informed or otherwise improved my life in some small way. I've completely butchered that intro, but we're going to roll with it because I am running out of time today. And the first video that I have for you this week, the first video of 3, I should say, isn't retro, it isn't vintage, but I do think this is very important, and it is a channel that I have talked about before on Reese Rambles, but I think this is quite a bit of useful information for those of you out there who have been affected by the end of Windows 10's official support from Microsoft, something I have talked about at length in the past couple of Rambles. And a bit of good news, actually, for people who are still stuck on Windows 10 for whatever reason. Perhaps you can't move to Linux because you're running stuff that only works under Windows. Perhaps you prefer to run Windows. Perhaps your hardware isn't compatible with Windows 11 and you don't just want to chuck it away and buy a new computer because you're quite happy with the way that it runs. Well, there is an official option available now. It's a bit of a hack, but it's a very, very simple one, and hopefully it should save a lot of computers from going into landfill, which can only be a good thing. This is Michael MJD. Love this channel, always watches stuff as soon as it comes out. He usually kind of pokes around Linux distros and stuff like that, but in this one he's talking about Windows 10 LTSC. Now, the Windows 10 Enterprise LTSC release is one that is kind of known about. It's designed for enterprise users who are stuck on 10 for whatever reason, and Microsoft has committed to supporting that until 2027, so another couple of years of support. But what Michael MJD has discovered here is that you can actually upgrade your copy of Windows 10 to the IoT version, the Internet of Things version. Despite the name, it works on a normal x86 hardware, and it is an in-place upgrade as well, so you get to keep all of your current setup and applications and things. The only difference being that you will get security updates on Windows 10 until 2032. And it's literally just a registry change to get this installed. And this is all explained and demonstrated in this video, including some of the potential caveats and benefits of doing this. And I just think this is such a great video to put out there. I think it's doing a great service to the computing community. And I just wanted to help kind of give it a bit of a shout out and draw some attention to it. Only 7.5 minutes long, but it does go through the steps of the process and kind of show how it all works. Yeah, Windows 10 LTSC IoT Edition. You can upgrade your current install of Windows 10 without affecting anything. Definitely well worth doing, I think. The second video is more gaming focused, and this is a channel that I have talked about in the past. This is That Nukem Guy, who is coming up on 10,000 subscribers. I feel like I've followed the growth of this channel over the past year or so. Really successful and quite deservedly so. Very prolific with these very informative and interesting videos, particularly about Doom, which, as you may know, is something of a topic that is quite dear to my heart. But yeah, I learned quite a lot of things here. This kind of pulls together some information from the Masters of Doom book and also John Romero's other books and interviews and things. And also some information from the other developers that's kind of come out over the years that talks about the decisions behind the kind of level design of Doom 2 and some interesting behind the scenes information about the games industry at the time and how that kind of affect the development of Doom 2 and how it all came about. And I thought this was a really interesting video. And yeah, learned a few new things about Doom, which is quite unusual for me after all these years of being such a huge fan of the game. Very well put together, very well told, and very well researched, as always, from that Nukem guy. 12 minutes and 19 seconds, and yeah, if you're a fan of Doom, I think it's going to be an interesting watch for you. Video number 3, my third and final video. Again, not a retro, gaming. Well, I guess it is retro, isn't it? Because obviously you've got. Let's not get into that. Anyway, this is Screamer, and I was going to make this one of my news stories this week, but to be honest, I've covered far more stuff than I originally anticipated when I first started putting this ramble together for this week. And to be honest, me kind of regurgitating all the information that's in this video is perhaps a little bit redundant anyway. I would go and give it a watch because it is an interview with the developers of the new Screamer reboot. Of course, this huge racing franchise from the 90s on the PC. It's coming back. And the reason I am quite keen on this is because they are introducing some really interesting new game mechanics and things that I don't think we've really seen in racing games before. And I like that they're trying to do something new and interesting with the franchise and try to do something a little bit different. I think that's always well worth pointing out. And from what I've seen so far of the development of this game, it is shaping up to be something quite cool. I'm a huge fan of the Burnout games and, of course, Wreckfest, which I do use quite a bit on my channel for demoing various things. And very much that kind of combat style of racing with, wrecking and takedowns and stuff taking shape in this Screamer reboot. So yeah, it's one that I'm keeping a very close eye on. And this video basically just brings us all up to speed on how the development is going and some of the features that they are implementing. It's only 5 minutes, well, just under 6 minutes. And like I say, it is essentially an interview with the developers. Some great behind-the-scenes information on their decision-making process and some of the stuff that is coming in this game. So that is videos of the week. Michael MJD's video informing us of the existence of Windows 10 LTSC IoT and showing us how to install that. That Nukem guy talking about some very lesser-known facts and things about Doom 2. And an update on the new Screamer game. So yeah, hopefully there's something there to whet your appetite. Of course, they will all be linked down below in the description and in the show notes on your podcast app if you want to go check those out, along with everything else that I have covered in this week's Ramble, as always. And that is that. So thank you ever so much for joining me for this week's Ramble. Just another couple of small bits of business before I let you go about your weekend. Of course, I want to say a big thank you to my community over on Discord who provided some of the stories for this week's Ramble as always and some fantastic discussion around those. Steve's Tech Shed, Manemo, Gravitone, Technic, DOSFox and Dave Velociraptor. That's right, the Dave from This Week in Retro, this commemorative mug that you see on my desk every week. I do genuinely use this in the studio and drink my tea out of it. This is when Neil was on paternity leave, and I actually took over as part-time co-host of This Week in Retro. And Dan very kindly made me a couple of commemorative mugs, and I treasure them dearly. But I do use them because I do like to drink a lot of tea. Anyway, speaking of Dave, he posted, he actually sent me something that I thought was rather interesting and rather relevant to those of us who are big Atari fans. This is the Joy of Sticks. Now, the Joy of Sticks has been a big part of the Atari community for the longest time now. There's also the YouTube channel, of course. Mark, a huge Atari ST fan, big on the social sites on YouTube and also the blog, thejoyofsticks.com as well. And the news this week is that there is a newsletter. The Joy of Sticks has moved over to Substack and actually launched as an official newsletter that you can sign up for, and you can get updates from Mark, in your inbox, which is very cool. Something I have, of course, already signed up for, and really interesting kind of reviews and humorous coverage. Very in-depth, very well-informed coverage of Atari ST stuff in particular. So just thought I would give a bit of a shout-out to a fellow member of the community. Thanks to Dave for bringing this to my attention. Very much looking forward to seeing, kind of what comes about of this newsletter. Good stuff. And, of course, there is the YouTube channel as well, well worth checking out. And speaking of YouTube, I released a main channel video today all about the Atari 2600 Plus PAC-MAN Edition, that 45th anniversary edition. A review of that, which was sent to me for review. And if we just take a quick look at the stats for that, we can see that this video isn't doing very well. Not surprising, it's kind of the perfect storm of less popular videos. So, of course, it's been a couple of months, so I will have fallen off a lot of people's radar, and of course the YouTube algorithm's radar as well. 598 views in its first 4 hours, or coming up for 4 hours, which apparently is 402 less than usual, 40% fewer views. Thank you, YouTube, for informing me of that fact. It's a longer video. It's a review. It's been a while since I've reviewed anything, or indeed released anything on the main channel. So it's not so bad. Hopefully it'll pick up over the weekend as people have more time to watch it. Of course, being stuck inside here in the UK with the dark and damp weather, we've had bonfire night and all of that stuff as well this week as well. But so good to get the ball rolling on videos again and actually get something out there. And that's kind of the main thing. So, yeah, thank you for all of your support and for joining me again for Reese Rambles, and indeed over on the main channel, Control-Alt-Reese. This weekly podcast goes out on my second channel, youtube.com/Reese Rambles, and also on the podcast platforms every Friday night at 2 minutes to midnight. And yeah, as you've probably seen, I cover all manner of retro and vintage and even modern gaming and computing topics, whatever takes my fancy and whatever my community seem to be particularly interested in on any given week. So thanks once again for joining me. That's all I have for you for this week, and all that's left is to say bye.